Welcome to the Wayne Bennett Podcast, celebrating West Virginia's people, places, and the culture of Southern Appalachia. Now here's your host, Wayne Bennett.
Welcome to Wayne Bennett's podcast. My name is Wayne Bennett. This is episode 80, and I'd like to welcome all the listeners. We haven't had a podcast for a couple of weeks. Our family lost a loved one, and it's been kind of a trying time for us. And it got me to thinking about, how our society has reacted when a death is near or when one has occurred. In 1975, I was teaching at Woodrow Wilson High School. I was teaching 11th grade English, and the school, along with the county, came up with an idea that we were supposed to offer some mini classes, MINI classes, to go along with the required classes at the school. And I was teaching English, and the mini classes were to go 3 days a week and last up to 18 weeks. Teachers were supposed to come up with their own ideas that would enhance or enrich the class that they were teaching. Now I thought, and I was trying to come up with an idea to go along with literature of 11th grade. And I kind of remembered that students were handing in research papers and doing essays and things like that on death and dying and different subjects or different things affiliated with that. And it seemed to be a lot of interest in that particular area. Most of the students that I had who were 15 or 16 years old had not had an experience with a loved one who had passed away. A few had lost pets. Some had lost grandparents, and in rare occasion, maybe a friend, but most of them had not had any experience at all. So I found an article written in the Junior Scholastic that particular year, and it was called Death: An Inevitable Experience. And so I took that title and I offered it into my class. Edgar Allan Poe at that time was one of my favorite authors, and he wrote proficiently about the process of dying, and some of the stories that he wrote kind of got pretty eerie. When I offered the mini class, students could sign up for which ones they wanted. Over 400 students signed up for my class. Of course, I couldn't teach 400 students, but so a couple of the teachers who were in the same field were drafted into going along with my particular class. When we got into the class, I was basically seeing how literature and history had treated the process of dying or death. But when we got into the legalities, the kids wanted to branch out. They had a lot of questions. There was a lot of curiosity among the students of that age. And so we started taking in more arms of education process. We look at legalities like wills and probates and cost of funerals, and study the funeral process, the traditional funeral process, like embalming or cremation. And one particular attorney in Beckley, Leo Brady, would come in and talk to our students and answer any questions about the things that needed to be done or planned for, and had tons of questions, very well received. We discussed types of burials. Some students that had experience would share their experiences. There was, at that particular time, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross had written a book called On Death and Dying, and she had outlined a model of the stages of grief. Those particular stages are still agreed on, that most people will go through these, and they are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. They don't have to be in that particular order. Those are usually in a normal grieving process, if there is one. We had contacted a local funeral home. Keyser Bryant Funeral Home was on Johnstown Road, and Doug Bryant owned the funeral home. And the director at that time was a guy by the name of Dan Summers, a young guy, very personable. We had asked if we could bring some students over and go through the funeral home, and he could explain what actually took place, embalming and cremation. And they actually, at that time, Keyser Bryant was only one, I think, of two crematories that in the state that actually cremated bodies, and it was relatively new at that time. And so they were very, very cooperative. I learned a lot myself. I didn't exactly know what, I was 25 years old, and I didn't have any experience with a loved one who had passed away or any kind of funeral planning or anything like that. So it was some things that I didn't realize had taken place. There also, the students got into debates. At that time there was capital punishment, people being put to death for a particular crime, and some were for it and some were against it. We would get into some really lengthy debates, and kids did their research. At that particular time, one of the more popular or noted areas, there was a girl by the name of Karen Quinlan who was on a crash diet. This was I was thinking it was in New Jersey, but she had taken some Valium and had drank some alcohol. The combination had caused her to lose consciousness. So when she was taken to the hospital, they put her on a ventilator, and after several days, the doctors had declared her brain dead. So her parents, after a certain period of time, didn't want to keep her on the ventilator anymore. They wanted her taken off, but the prosecuting attorney in the county said, that's not legal, she's still actually breathing and those kind of things. So they went to court. It was a pretty well publicized court battle, and they got all the way to the state Supreme Court. And the argument was not so much about her, but it was about moral theology or euthanasia. Was it legal, or civil rights? Those kind of things. And it was well publicized. Every day that you watched television news, you would see something about the Karen Quinlan case. And eventually her parents, Joseph and Julia Quinlan, they won the court battle. Now they weren't necessarily, they didn't want her to die, but the doctors had told her that, she would not be able to function ever again. And they wanted her, if she was going to die, they wanted her to die normally. And she was being kept alive on a feeding tube. So they won the court battle, and they took her off the ventilator. Surprisingly, she lived 9 more years after that. They did keep a feeding tube there, but she had gotten down to like 65 pounds when she finally passed away. There were actually a couple movies made about Karen Quinlan. There was the parents themselves wrote a couple books telling what their side of the story was. And that was another discussion that we had in this particular class. We would have debates. Some of the students thought that they should take her off the ventilator. Some students didn't think they should. So it was an interesting subject. But anyway, the school newspaper did a little story on our class, and the class was called Death: An Inevitable Experience, and the local newspaper did a story. Well, when our local newspaper did a story, the Associated Press picked it up. And so all of a sudden, the story of our class spread all over the country. It was in several newspapers. Some of them were just little sentences or paragraphs, but it was interesting to people because it was a little unusual for a high school class on death to be offered in the public school system. And so that's why there was quite a bit of interest. Then when the Associated Press picked it up, the CBS TV picked it up. And we were contacted by CBS out of Atlanta, and they wanted to come and film the class. I was getting letters from different people. Some authors were sending me copies of their books that the subject area was death. Of course, we didn't try to, we weren't preaching any particular thinking. We did research several types of practices that different areas or different cultures had, what they did when someone had passed away. But we didn't endorse any particular kind. But of course, some people that saw it in the newspapers nationwide didn't like the idea, didn't think it should have been in the public school system. So a few of the letters that I got were not very friendly, but nothing threatening, just not very friendly. I even heard from one guy, Joseph Viner, and he had been an associate of General George Patton, old blood and guts. And Joseph Viner at that time in 1975 was about 88 years old, and I got to talk to him on the telephone. He just was kind of curious about what exactly we were teaching in the class. And as a soldier in World War II, I'm sure he had seen a lot of death and had different experiences like that. Well, CBS contacted us, and the correspondent was Ed Rabel. Ed Rabel at that time was a very popular news announcer, and later on, he won a couple of Emmy Awards for his work, and he also wrote several books. And so he was a noted author also. But he had asked me, what we had planned. And I told him, well, tomorrow we're going to debate this. And then we're going to go to the funeral home in the afternoon. And so the CBS crew flew up here from Atlanta, and they came in, and it was really exciting for a small town like Beckley. And these guys come in, these cameramen, these microphone guys, and this guy you see on television, and they interviewed several of the kids. They filmed some of my class, especially when the debate part was going on. They went to the funeral home with us, filming, and even the kids that weren't in the class were excited about what was going on at the school because CBS. And all the guys that were with the crew, of course, it was a story for our newspaper about another form of media like this coming in. And so they did a newspaper story, and some of the other local papers picked it up also. But we were interviewed. Two of the students that were debating was Karen Keatley and Tim Fultz. And both of them did an excellent job. They came over to my house the night before, and we kind of touched up on a few things, what was going to be talked about and what we were going to do, and both of them did a great job. One of them was for unplugging the ventilator of Karen Quinlan. The other one was not. Sadly, Karen Keatley, after she graduated from high school, was in a wreck that actually put her in a similar situation that Karen Quinlan was in, and she was actually kept alive for a while on a ventilator and before she passed away. And it was very, very ironic and very good person. But it was during the time the CBS crew was here, it was a whirlwind of activity. Then as I became a little afraid that when they actually put the program or the clip on television, that we might be embarrassed. They might embarrass our school. They might embarrass our kids, or we might look like a bunch of hellions or something like that. But it wasn't like that at all. They were very good with us, and they treated us well. And actually, Ed Rabel had the announcer said that he was very impressed with Woodrow Wilson, which was a young school at that time. It was only about 7 years old, and he was very impressed with the administration. Ross Hutchins was our principal, and he was a pretty stern guy, but he kind of let us do what we needed to do, and things went well. So after the CBS crew left, the show actually came on about 2 weeks later, and I think it was on November the 10th is when it actually took place, and it was great. It was on the evening news, and of course they kind of tied it in with Karen Quinlan's story, and it was well received. After that, after it was on CBS, I got called by a couple of national radios, one Jack Buck out of St. Louis. Some of you might remember him as a baseball announcer, but he had a Jack Buck talk show. He called me and he interviewed me how did we get started, who came up with the idea and this and that. And then also a guy out of Pittsburgh, I talked to him. He had and this is back before we had social media or anything along that line. So that was a lot of people listened to the radio talk shows, and well, they still do, but it seemed to be even bigger then. Of course, at the end of the year, the 18 weeks was over, and they didn't offer the mini classes again, or not in that same type of process. So basically it was 1 year and that was it. The Bluefield State College had contacted me, and they had seen how popular the class had been in high school, and they wanted to know if I would teach it on the college level. And I said, yeah, I would be interested. By that time, I already had a better idea of what I was doing. But they didn't publicize it very good, and a lot of the students didn't really know what it was, and they didn't try to explain it. They didn't explain what department it was from, and so we really didn't get anybody to sign up for the class when they had. Plus, it was kind of short notice, and instead of trying it again, they just basically kind of washed it away. And I wasn't too disappointed, but I really think if they would have had a little more time and a little more publicity, that it would have gone over on the college level also. But 75 was a big year as far as I was concerned. I got national television. We all kind of got an idea of how it works when they come in. I mean, everything is boom, bam, bam, bam. They work real quick, and then those guys were off flying to another part of the country after they left us. And but it was a good experience. And if we have any of the students out there that were in my class at that time, give us a comment on Facebook. We'd love to hear from you. But just something I wanted to share. Some of you may remember, some of you may not. The main gist of my program is, in the case if your family is going through a death process or someone, a loved one who's passed away, don't exclude the kids. Kids are, you may not have to include them on every little detail, but they are interested. They want to know what's going on, and they should be a part of the grieving process itself. And hopefully that you'll take heed and do that. But until next time, if you're not dead yet, you're not done yet. And this is Wayne Bennett, and God bless you.